Come have a coffee with survivors. Audra and Roman inviting guests and holding space to discuss the healing journey to reunite with our true selves.
We see you. We hear you. Welcome to Coffee with Survivors, our safe place. Today with special guest Siara, mother, healer, and survivor. Hello, survivors.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
So, our special guests multiplied themselves. Now we have also Michele on board. Hi, Michele.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. I ran off and got coffee.
Yeah, well, coffee with survivors means you need at least coffee.
I'm staring at my phone right now. I'm trying to share the video.
Yeah, go ahead. So, who do we have here? We have a lot of visitors already this morning. Hi, Betsy. Hi, Amy.
Oh,
And hi, Paul. I'm so excited for you guys. I really appreciate you being here because I know all of you are survivors. So it's kind of like the survivors club, kind of, sort of. And I really appreciate Michele being here. Everybody has a story. Audra, tell me a little bit about your story.
So I'm Audra, and I am a certified hypnotherapist and energy worker. I am a full-time professional nanny. I love what I do for a living. I currently penned a book. It is a memoir, a healing journey memoir. It is going to be launched August 24th of this year. So I'm super excited about that. We're still wrapping up the editing phase of it and working on the cover and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's exciting.
That's super exciting.
It is. It's super exciting. I've been building momentum and stepping forward to share my story. I've been doing podcasts, and then Roman and I put together this Coffee with Survivors. So that's my cover as right now, but we are actually formulating a new cover. So that's going to be a surprise for everyone. It's going to be a surprise for me too, because we're not there yet. So
why don't you do your own art?
What?
Why don't you do your own art piece on it?
I feel like I've got a lot. I know, right?
I can teach you. No, I understand.
Yeah, I'm still going through the editing process. Has been a healing journey in itself. Even though I've gone through therapy, and the book was really super hard to write. Going through the editing process, I'm reliving a lot of the trauma. And so I've got, my plate is full.
Yeah. I can understand that one.
Yeah.
You know, we have a problem with full plates, but I don't have a problem with full coffee mugs.
No.
So welcome everyone again. So Michele is here as a guest. We are planning Siara to be on board, but she has many obligations, kids and all this stuff. And, all these things can happen in between. And, people should have priorities. In that case, children have priorities. So we hope she will have time to hop on our session today. Now, Michele.
Yes.
Tell me a little about, we know each other. We had coffee rounds.
Right.
And I would like you to tell me a little bit.
I had a unique childhood. My parents lived in South America. My father was a mining engineer, and I grew up literally at the end of the road in the middle of the jungle. There were no movie theaters, no libraries, no shopping malls, no shopping centers, no grocery stores, nothing. There were about 200 families in the camp. The mine was right there. We went into the port city once a week. That's where my parents had, some friends there as well. My, I was very sick. I was a very bad allergy asthmatic, and I don't have very many memories before the age of 7 because I was in and out of hospitals all the time. Those memories that I do have are not pleasant. Some of my first memories are being disciplined. Once I started, I was one of the first trials here in the United States in Tucson for allergy antigens shots. And they were a godsend for me. They made 100% difference between my being able to function, go to school, things like that. But it seemed like once I was able to become active as an individual, I was hyperactive. A lot of the medications used to treat asthma are uppers, and I was ADHD to begin with. And so then my life kind of became a daily routine of not if I was going to get beat on and yelled at, but when and how many times. And my father was absent. He was there, but he didn't do what he was supposed to do, which was stand up to her, and step in. And where my mother left off, my sister took up. And at the age of 13, I was the oldest child in the whole camp, and I was the only one in my school in my grade level. And my parents had already put my sister to boarding school. Keep breathing. So my parents sent me away to boarding school at the age of 13 to the United States, which for myself was a foreign country in many ways. I had spent my whole life in a Latin culture. Spanish was my fallback. When I got angry or upset or hurt, I would automatically go into Spanish without even realize what was happening. I was very, very different than most of the kids at the school. They were from very rich families in the United States, had gotten in trouble with juvie enough times that the courts had said, send them to a accredited boarding school where they go into juvie. And it was movie star kids and heads of IBM and stuff like that. And I was incredibly innocent and built like a brick shit house. I don't know what that means, but I was, and I'm a natural platinum blonde. Just kind of feel like I had been lost most of my life. Trying to find my way.
I think you're doing a beautiful job finding your way, Michele.
Thanks, Audra. You and I have known each other for a while. So you and I have been through some stuff together, and watching your journey has been great, and I'm so grateful that you're not 60 trying to do it. I wish that this had been available to me when I was 20 and 30 in self-destruct. You can tell it's still very fresh and raw. And I beat myself up, telling myself, you're 60 years old. How can you still feel like you're 7 and 8, 9 and lost, not knowing who to turn to? Your sibling sexually molesting you. Failing a grade. I'm smart as a whip. I can run circles around most people. I don't mean that to sound the way it does, but I'm very, very smart. And I failed a whole grade the year my sister was sexually molesting me, and nobody stopped to ask what was going on. And I didn't talk about it until I was 50. It took the death of my brother-in-law from cancer for me to break down. as everyone was talking about what a wonderful person my sister was, and I lost it. And and I know now. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My computer talked to me about something. I know now that many times people reveal these kind of things in these very circumstances, in already traumatic circumstances. It brings other trauma to the surface. Fact of the matter is I am really lucky that I have a relationship with my mother that most people don't get from their abusers. My mother has come to the table and fully acknowledges that if she had been in the United States, Child Protective Services would have taken me away from her. She fully understands that she was cuckoo. The moment she was cuckoo. And she's doing everything she can to try to make up to it, to the point where I've told her, look, you don't need to apologize anymore. You've apologized with the sincerity that I hear and feel. My hurdle at this point in time is with my sibling, who has been one of the biggest parts and components of my life since I was 17 years old. So,
Thank you so much for sharing this, and I really, really love you for that.
I'm really proud of you, Michele.
thanks for being there. Hi, Siara.
Hi, Siara.
Hi.
We're so
Hi,
glad to
guys.
have you on board here. Now that we're all together, we would love to hear your story, but maybe we can kind of make a short, small healing container for us and whoever is watching. And we're going to place that healing container so everybody come in, feel safe in that container. You want to do that, Siara?
Yeah. Are you going to lead us through it?
Yeah, lead us through it. Let's make a healing container. Yep.
You know what? I don't know that I'm up for that just this second.
Oh,
Okay.
Still processing through Michelle's story. My goodness, my heart is so with you, Michele, and your entire family that's been going through this generationally. And I just wanted to tell you that, I'm so glad that you're here today and that you've shared with me.
Thank you so much. I caught a bit of the last time, and you're talking, and I felt an immediate kinship with you.
Oh, thank you.
So, and I think abuse survivors have that with each other. Those of us who have decided not to follow in our family's footsteps. Let me put it that way. Because I got to give both you and Audra the biggest of props for having children. Because I made a very conscious decision to not have children. Because my mother was abused and she was an abuser. And I know from my studies and my research that many, many times, more times than not, people who were abused become abusers, or bullies. And I didn't want to live with the memories of looking down into a little innocent face while I was abusing them.
That's a very big choice.
It was.
At one time in my life, that absolutely reflected what you just said. And until I was 25, I believed it was the worst thing you could do to another human was to bring them into this world, and had no interest in being a mom. I totally get that. I do.
And
traumatic
I waited until I was 56 to get married and even to live with a man. Now, I did not live with men. Men did not live with me. I was very independent. And something that I'm having to deal with now, I talked to Audra about this earlier, is with the post-traumatic stress disorder, I allow things to build up inside of me. And then, so when I do go to verbalize them, I don't leave face. I don't leave the person any room to save face or have grace in the moment. I literally verbally eviscerate. And that is a form of abuse, to the person that's on the receiving end of it, which happens to be my husband. So I've had to come to the table and be very clear and honest in other counseling sessions, where I'm doing EMDR therapy, and be very honest with myself about that part of things. It's not comfortable at all.
I'm proud of you again, Michele. That's a really big thing to acknowledge. And that's a huge step in the right direction, because we can't fix what we don't acknowledge is, I don't want to say broken, because I don't believe in broken, but if we're having an issue that's kind of creating the cycle to continue, if we don't acknowledge that cycle in a continuation state, we can't shut it down.
No,
we have to be aware, and it is very painful to be aware.
it ain't the easiest thing looking at the person in the mirror and being very honest with that individual, not who you want to be or who you'd like other people to see you as, but that person that's there in the middle of the night when you wake up and there's nobody else around. Who is that person? Do you love them? Can you sit with them? So, Siara, honey, are you okay?
Yeah.
She went MIA for a moment.
Yeah, this is gonna be hard. I've reached a point in my life where I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. I don't care what anybody thinks about how I look, my hair, etc. And I feel that many times we're so busy trying to present what is the picture perfect person that we're told by media and advertising and etc. that if you're not that, then you're less of a person. And what we need to know is that just about everybody around us has got scars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just hoping that if by being more open about it and speaking clearly about it without rancor or self-pity, that it'll give people who are younger with longer lives to enjoy the space to know that it's okay to reach out and talk about this.
It's real.
Yeah.
We need to teach the younger people, and even people our age and older, that want to experience a better life through healed filters. Because I think that when people experience trauma, they're not viewing reality. They're viewing their trauma over and over again in some form or fashion. That's how they're filtering life. Roman's got up types of traumatic experiences here. You guys want to take a look at that?
Well, I got everything but war.
Siara, having this up, do you want to kind of jump in and maybe talk a little bit about your space where you're at?
Yeah, so I come from a family that also has suffered from generational abuse and poverty. On my grandmother's side, my family came over across the continent and moved as far as Minnesota, where they became farmers. And there's a very high incidence of alcoholism and violent and sexual abuse. There is, and that was unwittingly passed down to my mother, who was also an Air Force brat who got moved all over the planet back when the military didn't care about families. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so I kind of have some things that have come down from both my mother and my father's side. On my father's side, my family came across the border. I'm a third generation American, but only the second born here. And there's a lot to unpack in all of that. And then in my own life, because of the traumas that my mom experienced and the way that her life kind of fell out because of my life, some trauma spaces very early. When I was 4 years old, my mother and I lived on the streets in Portland, Oregon. It was a very traumatic couple of years that we experienced that. I remember one time my mother, we were so poor and we were so hungry that I remember my mom only had enough money to get like one item at the grocery store. And so we had gone to the grocery store and my mother had she had bought a loaf of bread, and then she was really ashamed because she had stolen a jar of peanut butter to go with it to feed me with. And I remember when my mom brought it out and the look on her face, that like being so torn inside of herself, which has led me to kind of, I had talked about earlier how, with the Rona coming in, the coronavirus, I kind of, as soon as the first hints of like China going onto lockdown happened, I kind of started stockpiling my food upstairs because I was a little bit terrified of being out of food. I have 8 people to feed and 5 children. And I'm going to tell you, I did not just buy as much as we needed. We have a stocked pantry upstairs because I couldn't sleep at night thinking about not being able to feed my own children. It triggered me like deep down inside. And I was, again, like you said, 4 years old, hungry. And so, my life has been really kind of strange. And I've moved in and out of several different religious worlds. My mom, when I was young, was very open and spiritual and very much included, was open to my spirit guides and was open to things like that. And so she was a tremendous influence in that way. But then later, I lived with my grandmother from the time I was 5 until I was 10. And she was Southern Baptist Christian.
Oh my goodness.
Right. And they believe, by the way, that being molested as a child equals being tainted for life. That's like not an okay thought for a little kid. Like, what could you possibly have done to have deserved to be treated like that in God's eyes? Like, it does.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, I can't even with that. And then later I moved back in with my mom when I was like 10. And that was really traumatic for me. I was very much connected with my grandmother and still am. And, my grandma even says now that I'm just as much a daughter to her as I am, I'm more of a daughter to her than a daughter because of the way that our lives have been. And so then I moved away from my safety and stability into a home that had 7 people and dogs, and we lived in this 1890s house that had no back wall in the kitchen and 10 foot of snow outside of that. We could only heat the rooms that we lived in, you know what I'm saying? So like only my parents' room, which also seconded as our living room, was heated constantly, and 1 bathroom. Everywhere else, you were only allowed to turn the heaters on when you were in there because it was built on a mine shaft. Like, anyways, it was so. So I've lived in some like really interesting situations, and my parents at that time were very much into the Native American path. And there's and so anyway, so there was a lot of like shifting and compounding of traumas and being broken away from things, and then not having a family that really supported me because I hate to say it, but get this, they didn't want to take care of an emotionally disturbed child. And so because of their lack of outreach to me, despite them being stable, they kind of helped to perpetuate the very thing that they were trying to avoid in me, which has been something I've actually been struggling more now, like that anger for like making decisions consciously to leave me where I was.
Siara,
You know, like
here, I have a question.
yeah.
So, was there a consistent? I don't even know how to verbalize this.
Oh, you're breaking up.
So, for myself, my abuse was like this consistency. You know, it was a routine. It sounds like your situations of abuse were almost like combat. You never knew where it was coming from, when it was going to happen, or how it was going to happen. Does that sound about right?
You're breaking up right now. I only heard about half of that. I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? Or maybe I need to plug in.
No, can you hear me now? No, she still can't.
Okay, hold on. Let me log back in because I'm again. Hold on.
My point about it is that it can create like these different ways of coping with things. With myself, I knew where it was coming from. I didn't necessarily know what was going to trigger it, other than everything triggered it. But there was a consistent pattern. Do you know what I'm saying? And so
Roman has a consistent pattern too.
Right. So you can get into this rhythm that you deal with. But if your abuse is coming in unexpected times from unexpected angles and in unexpected ways, that's got to create this whole new mindset of hyper trauma, hyper awareness.
That's me. Mine are all situational. Mine wasn't constant. I never knew.
Yeah.
It just was like one relentless thing after the other. Hi, Siara.
Siara is
Okay,
back.
there we are.
Hey, you back?
I can hear you again. Yay!
Hey.
I'm sorry. What were you saying about?
So my question to you was: so my abuse was routine. You know, I knew, where it was coming from. I didn't know necessarily what was going to trigger it, like I said to them, but everything triggered it. And it was daily. Cheat. For yourself, kind of what I'm hearing in some ways is that you didn't necessarily know when it was going to happen, where it was going to come from, and what form it was going to take, and that creates not just this, abuse scenario, but this really super hyper alert awareness of trying to evaluate your environment and the people around you and what was going to happen. I mean,
yes. So I've recently come across a term. So there's two different types of like that people experience, and I had always been trying to describe this because there's one type of thing that I do, and I always say I have to be in a room to watch how somebody moves to see it. And then there's the other type of empathy where you don't need to be and you can feel them inside you, right? So the one that you're actually talking about right now is called highly sensitive persons, and it's actually of deep-seated trauma. You're hyper, like the subtle way that the guy at the next table just lifted his eyebrows, and you can tell from people because you're so in tune to the physical and the people around you that you honestly kind of drive yourself crazy because you can't relax anywhere with people, like you're always on the lookout. And yes, my trauma was really in many ways random and included not just my own environmental factors, but I went through a lot with some of my friends in childhood. And I had one friend whose awakening to sex was through giving herself to a boyfriend that raped her with a knife at years old. And so there's just like so many things to unpack,
right.
And really honest though, throughout all of that, I has always pulled me through is my deep connect with my spirit guides and with deeper purpose in this life. The one time when I was in my dark night of the soul, that experience being separated from that and being separated from feeling everything around me, it made me realize how detached other people could be and gave me a new perspective on how other people experience the world so singularly without having to feel what other people were feeling and experiencing. For me, it feels impossible to abuse somebody because I can't not see what's happening.
Yeah.
But anyways, but when you're locked in that space and you're disconnected everything, including your own light inside of your soul, it's a very different world. My heart is with everybody that walks through the world being that disconnected. Like I can't even imagine.
I have to agree.
Ironically, it was something I point. And now I'm just so grateful to be back with it. So
I think that the world teaches us to be disconnected on purpose. And I think that we have aha moments in our life that bring about awareness, and we feel that connection, and we start investing there or we continue to stay disconnected. But I think that I think the world teaches us to be disconnected, because the more connected we are, we're more powerful.
Right.
Or more sovereign.
Right. My childhood was routine. As I got older and went away to boarding school and then college and stuff, it became more like yours, Audra, where there were situational, so that I was constantly aware. I've been attacked, incredible numbers of car accidents, and a constant and chronic dealing with my sister, which I haven't wanted to step up and acknowledge that for a very long period of time. I talked a little bit about this when we were on Messenger. I had tried to talk to my sister about the child abuse, about her abusing me sexually. It's been almost 8 years now or more. And I had done my research before, so I knew what the two reactions were: either denial or, brushing it off. Well, it's just usual sexual exploration. It's like, no, you were 13, I was 9. So I recently got a text from her, and it was very cryptic. Said, I wanted to watch this movie called Cracked Up, the Daryl Hammond story on Netflix, and use a tissue, watch it with Mitch, and when you're done, call me. So I watched the movie, and I was like, I thought to myself, yeah, you don't get to play this movie anymore, Deborah. And it is a very difficult docudrama. It's a documentary. It's not a docudrama, about a very troubled man whose level of child abuse, was beyond what I experienced. And we talk clearly about the changes of the chemical balance of the brain of the child and how it affects the adult and the decision-making processes, etc. So I took a deep breath and I called her, and she starts and says, well, you were beat on every day. And I thought to myself, no, you don't get to go down the path of what Mom did to me. Mom and I have dealt with our stuff. Mom has stepped up to the table and acknowledges what she did, etc. It's time for you to come to the table. And so I said to her, I said, what you don't understand is that you are part and parcel of this whole package. Well, yes, I kind of know that. I just thought maybe we could open up a dialogue. And I snapped. I said to her, you watch a documentary and you decide suddenly on your term in your time that you want to open up a dialogue about something that I've been trying to talk about for 59 years? I don't think so. And I said to her, you don't get to watch a film and have some kind of epiphany and call me and want to assuage your soul. It's not going to happen on my time. When you can come to the table and be honest with me about what your participation is with this, then we can talk about it. Now, my sister's a nurse, and she thinks that psychiatric care is psychobabble mumbo jumbo. And she suddenly goes into this cold clinical, well, you're upset. You're obviously affected you because you're angry. And I just said to her, no, you don't have any rights to this. You don't get to psychoanalyze me. Go do your own work. And then you can talk to me about it. Well, I got the nice talking to you, sister. And she hung up on me and then proceeded to shun me over the course of the, she's still pulling her shunning shit on me. And in the past, it would have worked. I would have groveled. I would have, done anything to open a dialogue. I would have said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But I don't feel like I was wrong. I don't feel like I owe her an apology. And I'm not going to. And I think that's one of the things that can kind of really irritate me about the process when you're going through it, is the people who want to step in and take ownership of what you're doing, or to piggyback onto it and expect you to acquiesce in some ways to them. And I can't tell you how long it's till you can hear it in my voice to say I was sexually molested by my sibling. I feel embarrassed and ashamed. And there's no reason for that.
Mm-mm.
But part of that is because of the way she is refusing to acknowledge it. And I have to figure out within myself, because she's a part of my life. She's my only sibling, much like you, Siara, giving your brothers the grace of talking, or other people talking to them, talk fully about it. She's always going to be a part of my life. So I have to figure out within myself where to compartmentalize that so that I can, but I just, for me, really, I want people to look at it and say, she's an older person and she's been through all of this, and she's willing and open to talk about it. I, as a younger person, so that they don't continue in destructive patterns in their lives and recreating those situations that they're more comfortable dealing with because they've got the tools to deal with the abuse. They don't have the tools to deal with a non-abusive situation. Because I find that we self-sabotage ourselves. So
Let's talk about how we, if you all don't mind, how we kind of recreate traumatic experience in our life because it's comfortable to us. And it sounds to someone who hasn't experienced a lot of trauma in their life, it sounds really bizarre, I'm sure. But it even sounds bizarre to say it because but it's true. When we go through things, wow, Roman, you got me front and center there, don't you?
Important. What you're saying is really important because I don't think we step up and acknowledge this.
Well, I think it's a very bizarre phenomena that happens when you experience trauma. You get so used to something, and even though it's not good, it feels, it's known, so it feels safe to us because we know exactly what to expect and how it's going to play itself out. So later in life, when we haven't healed our traumas or confronted them, we tend to recreate these patterns in our life with the outside world because it's what feels safe and comfortable to us. And it's all self-sabotage, and it's very painful and very destructive. And until you recognize why you're doing that, there's really nothing you can do about it because you think it's literally your reality. Like you keep saying, why do I keep
Picking the wrong guy.
picking the wrong guy? Or why do I, repeat the traumatic pattern that happened to me of abuse? Like, we don't understand why we're doing it, but we're doing it because it feels comfortable. So do you guys want to talk about that? Ladies and gent?
I have an incredibly poignant story about that in my own life. Because I was molested as a child, and some of the other abuses I went through, including later being raped as an older teenager, I decided that my first chosen sexual experience was going to literally be with somebody who wouldn't remember my name the next morning. And I chose a man who was at best a really bad choice to sleep with. And sure enough, the next morning, he got up and acted like nothing had happened. Was really like almost on the verge of like trying to remember my name, even though we'd hung out at his house like a bunch of times, my friend and I. And I remember being so angry, even though I had known that I had in some part specifically chosen him because he would be detached from me and I wouldn't have to deal with emotions and sex altogether. And then my next experience with choosing a partner, it was with my drug dealer. So, I mean, and to be honest, I was really destroyed by those experiences with those people, even though I had set out in some way to be a part of that. It reaffirmed some piece of me and crushed me all the same. And of course, it made no sense. And, you know, my friend who was with me the day after the first guy, we left in the middle of a blizzard and walked home 18 miles, you know, because I wasn't going to stay in his house. I put myself through that.
I think part of it too is justify being angry. You know, if we continue to put ourselves in the situations where things play out the same thing again and again and again, then we can justify being angry about it. So it allows us, you know, that anger space rather than dealing with the actual events. So yes, I thought that you and I had quite a bit in common. So yeah.
It wasn't until my early 30s that I actually had an experience of making love with a partner. Because previous to that, I would get really angry at partners who wanted to have that deep emotional connection with me in sex, and I would fight with them. I'd be like, I don't make love. You know, that's it. That's what you can get from me.
Yeah, I do sex, I don't do love.
And to be honest, I fought with the guy that I actually crossed that barrier with. I fought with him 10 minutes before that happened and told him the same thing. And I was like, we're going to go back into that room and I'm going to prove it to you. I can't do this. And I surprised myself, but then it was the only time until my current partner, where I was able to consistently bring in healthy sexual connection with a partner and to not feel violated or gross about it. Like, and I don't know how to explain that, but like mixing emotions and sex for me for a long time was really the grossest thing you could possibly do. I mean, besides having kids, I mean, it was like the next worst thing that you could and that was my perspective.
Well, I think when you have an experience and especially when you're young, you think that's what that experience is supposed to look like. So you create a core belief in your mind. Roman, do you have the subconscious mind?
A lot.
Yeah. Do you have that clip on the subconscious mind?
Yeah. Oh.
Not that one.
Uh-oh.
That's a pretty good one.
I'm crazy.
Well, Sorry, I tried to make it happen. I uploaded the wrong file.
Okay. So the subconscious mind is the part of our mind that is aware of everything, literally everything, and it never shuts down or goes to sleep. So the conscious mind is what we are experiencing right now. I'm conscious that we're all four on this screen. We're having a conversation. The subconscious mind is aware of not only this, but it's aware of what's happening over here, what's happening over here, what's happening. Like it's aware, hyper aware of everything. And when you have a traumatic experience, when you're younger, actually any time in life, it doesn't matter. But when you're younger and you're in your foundation period of your life where you're creating your foundation and basically your programming of how your computer mind is, your subconscious mind is going to filter the world, you create core beliefs. So when you're being abused or molested as a child, or raped, your belief is that that is what sex is supposed to look like and feel like. So when you get older, you create and you bring in situations, or you go and look for the guy that's not going to remember your name the next day, Siara, because that is going to validate the belief that you have that this is what sex is supposed to feel like. It's supposed to feel disconnected. There's not supposed to be any love there. And then when you get older, you start becoming more aware, and you tell your partners, you kind of know what's going on a little bit. You tell them, no, sex is not about love. I will not have sex lovingly because that's not what it's supposed to look like. And then when you start going, you become more aware of where that core belief is coming from and why, then you can start healing that core belief. Roman Scott, the subconscious mind only thinks in the present. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. So in that statement right there, when you're experiencing trauma and you create a core belief that sex is supposed to not include love, it doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined there. So and also in that particular statement is where the triggers lie. You get triggered about something happens in your conscious state, and it triggers the subconscious mind and it starts replaying things. So there it is. I'm crazy. I'm not healthy. There's the core belief. That's the core belief that we're working with right now. There's a trigger, there's avoidance around it. You check your behavior, the mental activity, increased psychological arousal, and the reassurance seeking. So that reassurance seeking is basically the validation of the core belief, I'm crazy. So you're going to continue to seek things out in your life that are going to validate that belief that you're crazy. So that's how all that happens. So maybe we could talk about having this awareness that we've all experienced those patterns in our life, recreating and validating those beliefs that we find are not true and not conducive to a happy, healthy life. Do we have some tools? Do you guys have some tools that you want to share?
Let me share a little bit of short story, and I'll tell you a little bit how I kind of got out of it. I share pretty much similar trauma with you guys, more or less. It started prenatal. I was involved in a car accident that I had no clue about. I was in the womb. There was a hit and run. That experience was transmitted to me later. I had always the subconscious emotional need to help people no matter what, even over my dead body, kind of, sort of. It started influencing me. Then my parents got divorced when I was 3. There was a lot of, family disturbance in that. Family got, departed. I was temporarily relocated to Austria. My mother had no clue where I am. Me, obviously not. I was too young. But it's supposed to be my mother was looking for me. My grandma was hiding me. So there was a legal thing involved, but didn't involve so far. And then it became this back and forth in different countries. As a 3-year-old was kind of, weird. Then when my father got basically together with his first stepwife, with my stepmother, it became a very interesting relationship because my father was an immigrant in that country. He was working for oil industry, and it was in the period of time where Greece was a little bit unstable politically. So he was an Austrian, he was European. It was kind of like the American being like in Africa, kind of sort of. And it was obviously very attractive. So he had girlfriends, and I was part of it. I was being hiding in the car, so because he has nobody to care for me. So there was this traveling around with that part. So the stepmother started later to be abusive. They will live in a very poor neighborhood. Like we will literally go to the chickens, get some eggs for breakfast, kind of sort of. But the whole environment was poor. Her stepfather was an immigrant from Turkey. So it was a very patriarchic family system, consist of 4 women, and I was the only child there. So there were no other young children there. My father was abroad. I was staying with them. There was a weird relationship, as I remember, an Uncle George, kind of sort of, who was playing a role in that house. Now thinking backwards from my childhood, I think it was, with my stepmother, something going on. However, when I was, my father earned money. She was spending money. There was a little bit of tightness there. Finally, they got a house. I lived in that house, but there was an abusive relationship there. It was always a jealousy between my stepmother and my father, and I was in between. Now, there was a physical and emotional abuse in the fact of I had to massage my mother's legs because she was tired, no matter, and I was like 5 or something like that. My mother finally found me, and there was a police order. I had to come. They came in, took me from there. I would stay there for a weekend. My mother gave up on me because I was totally nuts about stuff, and I couldn't handle that meeting with her, and she brought me back. Now, that was an incentive for my stepmother to go to the next level because she started forcing my father to do things. I don't know exactly the relationship at that point. But I remember a scene where my father left the house and my stepmother grabbed me by the shirt and she held me outside of a 3rd-floor story with my underwear hanging on her hands, like out of the window. But it was interesting because I had time to observe both parties, my father staring up and my mother staring down. And that was a tricky part. Do you need something?
My headset's are missing. My earbuds from in the bedroom, they're completely gone.
Oh.
I have no way.
Oh, gotcha. Hold on.
I love that voice that I just heard.
Yep.
I haven't seen Barbara in forever.
I haven't seen since they got married.
Nobody
That
saw Barbara
voice.
yet.
I'm very
Yeah.
busy. I need to.
She has sessions, so I had to help her out a little bit because I took over her office today. And hold on, let me put my dog away. I got it.
Okay, girlfriend, you don't get to act like you're cold while we're sitting over here in almost 100-degree heat.
And
Beautiful. Woman.
I have something called Raynaud's disorder.
I know
and
exactly
so,
what Reynolds is. Yeah.
Yeah, when my hands get cold, it makes all of me cold, and my hands are getting cold right now.
Yeah.
Even
Don't
though
let
it's
it go
warm,
blue.
but I'm
And
freezing.
so what happened next was kind of went quick forward. We changed country. We went to Iraq after that. So we went in a foreign country under Hussein back then. Many abuses happened there, but at the bottom end, for me, that abuse, emotional pressure, humiliation, make me feel guilty, make me feel wrong. At some point, I remember one of my younger brothers back then, he just was gone. He was my stepmother's son. He fell into the swimming pool that my father created, and I saved basically his life, diving into the muddy water, getting him out. And I remember that I was wondering that she didn't jump in the water. I jumped in the water. But when the end of the story was that I was blamed that I was playing with him in the yard, and I basically kind of eventually have him fall in there because I was irresponsible. And so these things, suddenly remembering back, came up. And I remember another point I needed to go for a shower and taking a bath. And back then it was 74. I was 6. So it was cold water. So she said, and she was on the phone. She said, like, well, make some water. So I went upstairs. It was an outside petrol, like gas fuel. So I had to take the bottle, fill it in, and of course have to light it up. Kaboom. The whole thing went up in flames. I was glad I wasn't burned. But I went downstairs telling my mom, my stepmom, it's burning. And she's like, go get your bath. And she was continuing the phone. She basically didn't pay attention to what happened. So, well, I had to extinguish the fire, and obviously the whole street was on fire because I was trying to do it with water. The water went down the drain and then down the street. The fire department came up there. So that was fun. I got blamed for that because I put the house on fire. And so we see that there's always the pattern. But at the end, I recognized that all my choices in the future were around recreating that feeling of safety in that unsafe frame. And I couldn't recognize that. So when I was looking for a girlfriend back then, I remember it was always in relationship to some of the parts that I had to work on through that trauma. The embarrassment, you're not good enough. You always fail. You cannot make up your mind. And all these things. And out of the neediness, I had to satisfy myself with the minimum amount of survival. Like, not more than that. You don't deserve more than that. You deserve the minimum attention. And I recognize all these good aspects of those relationships, but I got stuck with the bad aspects of it. And that's what the attraction was. And then what I recognized was that it was normal until the relationship locked into a more relationship. Like, as long as we were friends, no problem. But as soon as that became personal, that switched.
I think that's what.
So in other words, what I see likely, and since I'm working with dogs, I see the same pattern. Once we step into that relationship, suddenly it switches and the PTSD kicks in, underlying that the reason why you're triggered is because you are in a relationship. As long as you're not in a relationship, everything is safe until you are in it. So you basically put yourself into that relationship. And I see how Michele and Siara says, I don't want any children because I will open that door to that trauma, to that PTSD response. And I know what's going to happen next. And I'm not doing that. But I didn't have my parents with me. I was literally living back and forth. And I saw how much it was needed. How about you lay down?
I hear him in the background.
Yeah, he's like, he was outside. I want to go outside too.
Well, I think he's telling you he loves you. He hears you telling your story, and he's talking to you.
And then I recognized when I get my first marriage with my wife, back then in Greece. Okay, let me take care of it.
Telling you that dog is trying to hold space for you, Roman.
He's holding space for me in this crate.
I just want to say that exactly what Roman is talking about is like something I definitely noticed in my 20s, that I would get into these relationships because I was definitely a serial monogamist in my 20s. But my close friends and I had a joke that as soon as somebody had sex with me, it was like they had depressed this destruct button. It was going to wear out within 3 months to maybe a year and a half, like that was just how it was going to be. And very much like Roman, as long as I was all friends with somebody and they made no impositions on me in that way, we were good to go. I could be as open and loving and amazing to you as I possibly could be. If we had sex, that was it. Like it was going to change, and it was going to change in short order. Like it was, yeah.
No, I was the queen of one night stands. Forget it. Don't go away. No, you don't spend the night with me. I don't spend the night with you. Done. That out. I went about sex like a horny male. And people say, "Oh, you were a nymphomaniac." Well, yeah, maybe. I I genuinely don't know. I just didn't know how to have a relationship. I mean, from what I watched from my mom, it's almost as though she couldn't let things be good. I don't know how to explain that. She would just have these, she would beat on me daily, and then there was this buildup, and then she and my dad, everybody, she just like volcano up on everybody. I think my parents really enjoyed makeup sex. And then things would be okay for a while. But it was like she couldn't let it be good. She had to destroy that. And the Roman Catholic Church has a saying that says, "Give me a child till the age of 7 and they're mine for life." And basically it speaks to what Audra talked about. Those years where you're setting that pattern up here really happen between ages of birth to about 7 or 9. So if you stop and take into consideration that I was in and out of hospitals until the age of 7, don't really have very many memories because I was struggling to breathe. My formative kind of started then around 7, when you're already kind of fairly mature. And then 2 years later, end up getting sexually molested by my sister. And then 3 years out from that, I had just turned 13. My parents shipped me away to a foreign country, the United States. And so I just flat didn't know how to have a relationship with anybody. So I didn't even know where to start, much less be friends and then have sex and then go away. Like for Siara and what happened with her, I just didn't.
Mhm.
We had a question pop up. I don't remember the name, but the question was basically asking if does not being interested in sexual stuff a sign that we aren't healed or something that will not attract to us a partner that will love us? I think that the answer, in my opinion, the answer to that question is it's not necessarily that you're not interested in sexual stuff that is going to show you that you're not healed. It's going to be more the type of partner that you're picking out. And I think that when you're not healed, you're going to attract people that are going to mirror back to you the wound. And you are going to continue to attract people that will mirror back that wound until you recognize the wound and begin the healing process. And I think the more that you heal that wound, the better you're going to attract. Then that's when you start attracting love, genuine love and caring and kindness. And I think, as far as the sexual stuff, some of that might be a lack of a hormone, and it also may be because you're not with somebody that that you feel loves you.
Mhm.
I don't think it's necessarily the sex, the lack of wanting sex or anything sexual. I think it's more of the person that is standing in front of you, the reflection that you're seeing back from that person that's going to show you whether you have wounds to heal or not. So if you're settling for someone that doesn't treat you good, then there's something going on within yourself.
Very well put. I remember when I was looking in my relationships, I was looking in all these aspects that I was imagining my perfect mother, which I never had. And then having all these punishments and abuse coming in from other mothers and other, people who were controlling my life. I was created this phantom mother, this perfect image that I was looking for. And so I remember a sentence my father said when I was asking him if I can go and find my mother. She was in Greece. And he's like, "You have no clue who she is. And it's not what you think it is." It was the stupidest answers I ever heard of a person in relationship to that aspect, because he could tell me how she is, or he should sip it and have my own opinion. But no, it was exactly very controlled there.
This prejudiced environment.
Right. And I recognize that I don't blame my parents for that, for what happened, and I don't blame my mother for that. Each person of them had his own story, just like mine. But I feel what I learned from that, and what I'm learning for you guys, because I think we're all kind of a bunch of path cutters. that we finally say, this has to stop. It has to stop because it starts right here. And I don't care about the pain. All I want to do is to stop that flow from happening. And I remember when we had our short conversation, I remember telling you about that. Amartias goneon pedevus in techna, which is an ancient Greek wise word, says parents' unsolved issues affect children. If we take that in consideration, and we know that science already confirms that genetics are being affected 17 generations back, which means with our emotions, we can affect our genetics, and our genetics affect our emotions. So if we're going as a path cutter down that road and says, I want to stop that from happening, I have to change my emotions, and how I am reflecting to those triggers around me, and that will change my genetics, and that I will not transmit down the road. And I think the reason why I'm not taking, your voice, but I'm thinking I came from the same, I didn't want to have children either. And as a husband slash partner, male partner, it was also my choice whether or not to do that. So my consideration was, I have to find a woman that doesn't want children because I don't want to be exposed of not wanting some.
Right.
And I was pushing that blame to my other partner if I needed to get out of their situation, like, I want now children and you don't now you don't. So I use that also as a tool, as a punisher, because as a victim, it's easy, as Michele already said, you can become the punisher because that's the only safety valve you have. Okay? And I think everybody should be aware of that just because you are in pain and just because you hit around yourself, you're still being in need of healing. But sometimes, because we are not feeling worth of help and we don't feeling worth of loving them ourselves in return, we choose partner who always makes our life difficult to do that.
Right.
And I think it's self-destroying. And it's also one factor. I don't want to become better than that because I'm not worth it, because I don't love myself. Therefore, I'm going to attract all these patterns that makes me be stuck exactly there. So I never reach my upper limit. And if I reach my upper limit, I'm going to freaking punish myself because I don't deserve that luxury of being there, being loved, and being able to breathe. And I think, Michele, where you went through the hospital and that need of breathe, which is a primary reinforcer, the only way for your life to do is, I just want to breathe. I don't care about anything else. You can abuse me, you can use me, just let me breathe.
Yes.
And I think that is where I can breathe no matter what. I am my own breathalyzer now. And I think what helped me a lot was all these relationships that I had those small aspects of that healing thing. And I feel each one was so important to me because that reflection that Audra said and Siara is what I can see that triggers me. And because it triggers me, I know it's there. And because it's there, I know how to push that button. I know how to push that button. I make things moving, and I make things moving, it gets out. Now, what do we do when it gets out? Usually we become violent. Usually we become self-destructive. And this is where the tricky part is. Without guidance, you either punch or hurt yourself or others. And this is where the balance has to come in.
The word I use for it is unrequited anger. We talk about unrequited love a lot, but if we really think about the word unrequited and anger together, it really does kind of explain that act out that we do, because we don't feel like it's heard or seen. And in order to get it heard and seen, we have to say it even stronger and louder, without recognizing the destructiveness of that as well. So, I mean, I do work myself with other people, oddly enough. And it is one of the things I work with, particularly with women, because society does not allow women to express anger. We're not supposed to be angry. We're not supposed to say no. We're not supposed to, turn around and say, hey, you know what, you're a son of a bitch. I mean, you're ugly, etc. And so we have other ways that we do it by acting out in different manners. Roman, I want to talk to you for about 2 seconds about the perfect mom thing. One of the very key part of my story is My father got cancer at age 47. When I was 47, he was in his 70s, and he wanted to die at home. And at the time, I had gone back to college and gotten my master's in accounting, and I was sitting for my CPA exam. I lived in Tucson, and I was coming up and spending 3 days here in Phoenix with my mom and dad, and going back and studying and going back and forth. And I realized that my mom wasn't taking care of my dad the way he needed to be taken care of. So I put everything in Tucson on hold. I had passed 2 of the CPA exams, and I had put all of that on hold. And I moved to Phoenix to take care of my dad so that he could die at home. And the day before, he died, he said 2 words to me: "Your mother." And I told my dad, "I'll take care of her. No problem." Now, I always thought my mother was a ball-busting, independent, smart, capable woman, and I never realized that she was my father's shoulders that she stood on. He was her biggest supporter. And I realized after about 3 months that she was going to die if she was left alone. And I packed up my house and left my friends and my career, and I moved back into the same house with my abuser. I don't think that I would be where I am, and I don't think my relationship with my mother would be what it was, and I don't think my mother would ever have had the epiphany and stepped up and acknowledged what she did if I hadn't have chosen to do what I did. But I became the child all over again. And it culminated when my mother got in, and I got into an argument, and my mother cornered me and had my pajamas wrapped up in her fist, and I saw her shoulder roll back, and I lost control. And when I came to about 5 seconds later, I had my mother up against the wall, hand around her throat. I dropped her. I walked into my bedroom. I grabbed a sleeping bag, and I slept in an open field that night. When I came back to the house, which is where all my possessions were, everything, the house was locked. And I told my mother that I wouldn't stay and do anything, that she would lose. My family would not hear from me ever again if she did not go to counseling with me. Now, we got a counselor. There's good and bad, as we all know. And this particular counselor loved my mother. They kept trying to one-up each other about where they had traveled and seen and done. It wasn't really a counseling session.
It was a sexual appointment.
Right. So we had actually, I guess we had been going to counseling before that. We went into the counseling session, and I was so angry couldn't even verbalize really. There was a lady there doing an internship to get her license here in Arizona, and I could tell that through her body language. Siara, you learn how to read people. You're right. Through her body language, I could tell that she wasn't happy with the sessions either. Because every time I would try to talk and delve into something of importance, he would kind of say, well, we're not dealing with that now. So we go into this meeting, and my mother proceeds to tell him her side of the whole thing. And he draws himself up to a ball and looks at me and says, do I need to call Adult Protective Services on you? And I looked at him and I said, you haven't asked me what my perspective is. You haven't asked me about being cornered up. And, I'm sorry, that body language, anybody who's been abused knows what that body language is. So I said to him, what's your responsibility? What about me? And the man looked at me and said to me that his responsibility was to the payer of the session. I got up and walked out.
Yeah.
With him, and I said, your verbiage and language says very clearly that I am not welcomed in this room. The lady that was sitting there, the look of astonishment at him was. I continued to take my mother to sessions and sat in the waiting room every day. And then when he'd go by, he'd say good morning, and I'd just look at him. It's like you pretty much said I don't exist, so you're gone. But it got better, but it really wasn't until my mother moved into assisted living and she moved away when she finally realized what it is that I did for her and the love, etc., and was able to come to the table. I don't want young people age 47 to go back in with their abuser and go through what I went through. Yeah, where I am. I look back on it and I think to myself, seriously, Michele? You went back to college when you were 40 to get your master's degree so that you could go and do, and you just put it all in the wind to go put yourself in the position of being abused again. It speaks to all, perfect, looking for the perfect parent, putting yourself back into the situation and setting yourself up. So this is the reason why I participate, and I'm so viscerally sharing. I want people to be able to solve and work through some of this stuff at younger ages so that they can have fuller lives. I mean, for me, I got time, but I don't have as much time as some.
Now you have enough time.
Yeah,
One thing that I recognize was that I had no clue that I had trauma because I felt I was just an asshole.
yeah.
I'm a miserable child. I'm punishing, and my parents got divorced because of me. My father's life is ruined. My grandfather's life is ruined. My boarding Catholic church was ruined because of me, because I was just like a bad boy, right? My neighborhood was like, oh, he's out again, like this alien kind of thing. And I was like, maybe I should leave.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just go. And I remember being on a bridge and the train was coming a couple of weeks before. A friend of mine jumped as a couple in front of the train because the parents didn't want their relationship. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to join your bias party. So I was on the bridge ready to jump. And I saw the train coming and I was like, what would the driver think if I smash against his window? And I kind of like, oh, maybe not. And then I made a U-turn. But I feel like the first time that I really recognized that there was a trauma involved is when I was forced by one of my abusive ex-wife to go to therapy. And I was lucky back then, or not, depending on the situation, where one of the mentors of the Meadows lived nearby where the apartment I lived. And so she came in and had a group of 9 people. And back then I was into spirituality, like Greek spirituality and arithmology. I was like, 9 people in that group. I should join that group. I was number 9, by the way. And
Interesting.
so I was there and I was sitting in that group of 9 and they were talking about stuff and the person tells this story and I was like, wow. And then the other person tells this story and I was like, holy shit. And then the other person tells this story and I was like, wow, how is he still alive? And I can see from everybody's, as the story went on and everybody's like, oh my God. And some were crying from the other one's stories. And I was like, what am I doing here? Should I tell them about my dog who died or whatever? And then it was my turn and everybody's like, wah! And I was like, why? What's wrong with me? Like, what causes that? I don't have a trauma. You guys have a trauma. I don't even accept that part. And so the mentor then told me, how about you sit in front of me and, sit down? And she gave me kind of something to hug. And that was my mother. And I was like, that's such a bullshit. Because that is too small for me to punch on it. I'm going to hit myself. There's something bigger, like a pillow. And I recognize, you know what? That's not for me. I felt like I recognized the trauma that I had, but I think the approach of feeling more victim, I didn't like it. And I was like, it doesn't even trigger me. I was just saying the story. I was crying a little bit, but it didn't trigger me. So I left, $3,500 less. And But back then in Greece, it's a lot of money. It's kind of 5 times the money based on
Yeah.
that. So I was already in default because I charged my credit cards to get to there, but because I wanted out of that. I knew that something is wrong, but nobody pointed it out. And after that, I was like, if I go to therapy and it is about my mother, and I know that I choose women because of my mother, what if I come out of that therapy and I don't like that person anymore, which I didn't? But it would kind of be more intense. I would hate that person because it wouldn't be my choice. And I still got stuck there. I saw her abusive tendencies towards her own children, and I moved to US with that person. And I got trapped myself because I didn't give myself permission to leave that relationship. The only thing I had to say, I'm not coming. We're just having a relationship. We didn't have kind of something official. I still have my own apartment. I was living kind of with them, sort of. But I felt guilty about those kids being in that relationship that I couldn't let go of that. So I said, I will come with you guys, spending a couple of days there, making sure that transition will not trigger her hitting the children. And as I'm becoming protective. And then there was that click that happened. She says, well, while you're here, why don't you apply for citizenship? I was like, sorry, Mr. President, I'm not into America right now. And
Sorry.
I felt abused right that moment because I wanted to get out. And she was just throwing hooks on me. And I was like, I cannot get out. And I felt so angry about myself not being able to say no to that. And I know many people see, abuse can only happen to children and to women or to military people when they go to war. But I can say from my perspective, and I know many people that I work because I work with people who have dogs, and there's always a situation going on. We end up talking about stuff. Men have also abuse issues. Our problem is we cannot open our mouth because we are not allowed to, because we are strong, and we shouldn't open our emotions because that is showing of a weakness. And as a man, you cannot be weak. You're Mr. Superman. But inside, you're kind of burning up. And then we have all these excuses, more work, we kind of shut down inside. And then we attract people who have trauma as well because we have to deal with it, and that becomes abusive.
Well, because you can rescue them.
Right? And then I remember one particular sentence of one of my girlfriends. He says, well, I rescued you. How dare you questioning that? I felt like a rescue dog. And I was totally okay with it because all I wanted is a house over my head. How sick is that? Now, what I liked you pointed out was that at some point, I missed that line.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, because that was kind of cool. Where there is a split. We are growing into that environment, and it's being pushing really hard right now, even more through politics, through religions, where we are more subdivided. Even in relationships, we are subdivided. And then we are being forced into abuse through those restrictions. So it seems like to me there is a system in place right now who takes advantage of our ability to step into our golden frequency and connect and unite with our higher self and squeeze it down a bit, lower the frequency, putting us anger in it so we're not getting into stepping into our golden frequency body, into our ascension body. And when we're talking about, changing our core beliefs and stepping into our higher self, the problem is we recognize the core beliefs and suddenly we're being flooded with counter information and false information. So we're getting confused. What is my problem compared to the other guy's problems? Like, this person just lost his house.
Diminish it.
Right? Yeah. And all of a sudden you're like, no, you know what? I cannot just talk about it right now. Why would I call my mother? She's struggling. She just lost her job.
Right.
Zip it.
Right.
Boom. And I think we have to break through that eggshell, not by force, but by believing in what we feel inside and letting it out. And I think I so appreciate you guys for being here, hitting that eggshell to crack and open up. And I think Audra was my inspiration where she wrote the book. And it says,
Roger through a
if
lot.
she can talk about it in a book, I can talk about that with my friends.
Yeah.
So thank you, Audra.
Girlfriends that I stay in really good contact with. These women have known me since I was 18. They are tight, and they know so fully my story, 100%. And I don't know what I would do without those two women. They truly just, and that bespeaks a lot, I think, for my integrity as a person, because a lot of people who deal with trauma or who are abused don't have long-term tight relationships because they're not able to maintain them. Friendships take a lot of work and give and take and honesty, etc. And as a general rule, we have a tendency to run from that because that doesn't support where we were and stuff. And so having those relationships has saved me. I met Audra almost 10 years ago now, isn't it? At least 8.
No, I'm gonna like 8.
8 years.
Yeah.
And truly, when we met, that was the first class that I had taken that involved energy work. I had done yoga and I had kind of come in contact and reestablished something that I had as a child, but I was told that I didn't see those people and things when I really did. So I had come back into contact with that energetic place, but I didn't know how to handle it. In fact, I think the first meeting, I just cried through the whole meeting because there was so much energy in the room, and it was a positive thing, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. Since that time, I feel that my journey has been really rapid in many ways. I've come a long way really fast. There are days when I think to myself, isn't this shit ride over yet? And I recognize that it will never be over. That's part of being alive and awake and staying young is continually growing. But these forums, I think, are key to helping. And the more of us that talk about it and are open about it, I think the better, rather than walking around thinking that acting like everything is perfect. And if you're not as perfect as I am, then you can't be in my world, kind of thing.
There's
Go ahead.
There's 2 things that I'd like to say before we talk about the takeaway solutions. And one is what Michele was talking about a little bit ago. That's when you were saying that's why you were being so vulnerable and upfront with your story and honest, because I think that sometimes people don't realize that. And Roman, you mentioned it too. You didn't realize that you had trauma and that you were patterning. And I think when we share our stories out loud and people hear, and it makes them stop like, whoa, like I can relate to that, or I understand what they're saying. And they never understood before really quite what it was. So when they hear us talking about it, and something sparks within them, and then I think that may be an aha moment for them, that they're experiencing traumatic response, or they're experiencing the core beliefs patterning themselves for validation. So I wanted to just touch on that real quick with what Michele had said. And then Roman, when you were talking and you were talking about how the world is more accepting of women having trauma and people who have experienced war having trauma, and not really being accepting of men coming forward with trauma. This is, again, it's so important. And I appreciate so much, Roman, that you're talking about your stuff, because you're a way shower for other men, because that is a false narrative. For us to say that it's not masculine or an act of strength for a man to come forward and share what he's been through, and a man that is trying to heal, is a very false narrative. And we need to change that narrative, and we need to hold space for the men to come forward, because I think that until we hold space for men to come forward to heal their trauma, their generational trauma, their trauma in this particular lifetime, we are going to continue as a world to repeat history over and over and over, because that's the only reason why history keeps repeating itself, is because we are so weighed down by trauma. We're not ascending up because the trauma is too heavy and it's holding us all down. So when we as a society start holding space better for men to speak what they've been through and to hold space for them to heal, we're just going to keep looping around.
Yeah,
So I feel one important aspect is that we have to recognize that the feminine aspect cannot completely heal if the masculine aspect is not healed, because we have this original separation and we're kind of going into that loop, right?
It's Siara's thing behind you. It's all one thing. It's all one unit, the feminine and the masculine.
When we go back into this Adam and Eve situation, I feel before Adam and Eve, it was an additive. It was one piece. And we choose to disconnect because we need to be in that binary system right now to recognize how does this feel alone and how does this feel alone. And we got deeper into trauma because we cannot function alone. And so when we're talking about the Eros Gamos, is nothing else as uniting this masculine feminine aspect. So each one of you have a traumatized masculine or a traumatized feminine aspect, even if you're from an original sex, masculine or feminine. So while I'm trying to integrate my feminine aspect, I have to integrate my masculine aspect and love my masculine aspect, who put me in that position to be abused by the feminine aspect, so I can start loving that and connect it together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should see that from that perspective, that we cannot show the finger on our other aspect because that has to be healed as well. But before we be open up to the masculine aspect, we have to love the feminine aspect because we need to hold space for it.
Yeah. I mean, like, so I've talked about, my mom abusing me and everything, but my dad just flat fucking wasn't there. I mean, he was there, but truly, I mean, he was the other parent. You see your spouse beating the living shit out of a kid on a daily basis. What's your responsibility? Your responsibility is to step up and protect the child. But he didn't. And a lot of her anger had to do with her dissatisfaction within her relationship with him. So, and then he had been the one person that hadn't physically abused me. The year that I failed the grade, I lied. I lied about anything. You could ask me what color of the sky. I would have said it was pink. I mean, I just lied because I was trying to get someone to pay attention. My father hated lying with a passion. And he came home from work one day. It was a very long day, hard work. I mean, he worked hard. And my mother just started in on him about my lying about something. He went out and he cut 2 switches. And he broke one on me, and the back of my legs were bleeding. And he started in on the second switch. And my mother and my sister intervened. So the one person who hadn't, as a little kid, you don't put it into perspective that he was Aston. He was just the one person that had never beaten me. When he did, he left marks like no one had ever left on me. So that shutdown just went. And in all my therapies, I mean, I've clocked more couch time than I care to count, but I never talked about being abused. I never talked about being sexually abused. I never talked about my father beating me to a bloody mess. I never talked about those things. I never said a word. I've probably said and talked more fully about these things in the last 5 years than I have my whole life. Because I felt like there was something wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
rather than recognizing that wasn't the case.
We get tricked.
Yeah.
We do. We get tricked. So how can we, sending people off today that have been tuning in and listening to us talk, what can we send them away with that is a starting point? Anything? Do you guys have any tools or anything that has helped you that maybe could be a starting point for someone else?
Breathe. I mean, for me, that is one of the biggest things. Breathe. Because I get to a point where the blood rushes in my ears and I can't hear. My vision narrows down. My brain is hitting so many points so quickly I can't even I get 2 or 3 words from each sentence out and I just start to just devolve. So for me, and I'm an emotional person, you can tell, I cry easily. And that's energy coming out. I cry when I'm happy, mad, sad, glad. You name it, I cry. It's an expression of the energy for me. So for myself, when I feel that overwhelming just panic, your heart's beating, you can't breathe, I just step back and I will tell whomever I'm speaking to at the time, many times, I'm really sorry. I just need a moment. Please just stay there, hold space for me. And I just shut my eyes. And I allow myself to hear and feel everything that's in my immediate reality to bring me back to the space and then move forward. Breathe, keep breathing.
Yeah. My tip is to find a therapy. I'm not talking just about what people would consider conventional therapy. I'm talking about dance therapy, writing, journaling, art therapy, cognitive therapy, energy healing, any type of whatever you feel resonates with you at the time that might get the healing process flowing, your body movement, working out, like anything that gets the energy moving. That's my recommendation, to find something that is going to help you begin processing. That's my tip.
And don't be afraid to try many, many different modalities, and don't just on one. Allow yourself to go through a range and maybe even cycle back to some later, or try things that are really outside your box of preference to see if it'll work. Just give it a shot, because sometimes you'll find something that works for you that you may not have actually imagined would help you.
Well, and if you keep doing the same old thing,
it's insanity.
You might get the same old results.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, Audra, that you should say that to get the energy to be moving.
Move.
I don't know if that works for me, it's not moving the energy. For me, it's calming it, getting it to calm down. So sometimes for myself to engage in a really physical activity or something of that nature almost agitates me more. I don't know why.
Well, it's because you have stored trauma in your body. And when you start moving that trauma within your body, it's not stuck anymore. It's actually moving, and it's forcing you to work through something that has been stuck within your body for God knows how long.
Yeah.
So body movement is a big, it's big, because we literally, science has proven that we store trauma in our physical bodies. And when we start to move that body, we start releasing that physical trauma that's been stored there, and it's uncomfortable.
I know that from yoga.
What I learned from dogs, when they go through a trauma experience, the first they do, they shake it off. Mm-hmm. They breathe through it. I mean, nature gave us the tools.
Right.
We just look away from it. I'm not saying you should go into doggy stance and start eating raw bones, but breathe. If we look quickly in the trauma, we're talking about the takeaway here, right? If we talk about the trauma, the first thing we have to do is because we stuck it the moment we have that experience.
Yep.
The first thing we do is we hold our breath and then it gets stuck. Then the body responds with the automatic fear response, and then we go into freeze mode. Now that is being stored in through the fascia tissue. It goes instantly through the whole body. And kill me if I'm wrong, right? And then from there, we create a stuck trauma and we don't breathe it out because we have to shut up about it.
Mm.
And then that stuck trauma stops the chi from flowing. And if the chi doesn't flow, then we become stagnant. And we know what a stagnant water looks like. And we have the mosquitoes coming in and breed the nest, and we have the parasites. Happens because of that stagnancy. So if you look into the macrocosmos, we see, oh, wait a minute. If the water gets stagnant, my blood gets stagnant, I get ill. If my energy doesn't flow, then I get ill. And so energetic parasites are attaching to us. And then we go downhill with it. Unless we say, I can breathe. And take that first breathe in. And the next thing you have to do is freaking talk about it.
Breathe
And
out.
what do dogs do? Right? The first thing is they get startled and then they bark about it and then they shake it off.
You know,
I think, yeah.
You know, Michele, I am also a true daughter of Kali, and it is often for me more about calming my energy than embracing the storm.
Yeah.
Because once the screaming starts inside, I'm likely to destroy everything in my life, burn it down, salt the ground, and move on. Relationships, life, career, whatever it is. Like, I don't care.
Yep.
I have had to learn how to calm that. And on that note, I actually have done something that's kind of unpopular in some of our circles, but it's been very helpful for me. I actually got on antidepressants about 2 months ago. I realized and acknowledged that I'd been depressed especially since 2012 when my best friend committed suicide. And I also simultaneously realized that I am trying to trick my body back into something that it's never experienced. I didn't have a calm childhood. I didn't have a calm life. I am literally wired for drama all the time. And it's comfortable for me to live in the chaos, you know, like as much as I want to create peace, I always have 5 million projects going. Even if they're healthy, it's still chaos, you know? Yeah. And so once I got on those, I have noticed that like my, just everything in my system is so much calmer. I am clear. I can focus. I've been able to pare down the amount of things I'm involved in.
Yes, you're highly organized.
Pardon?
Let me guess, you're highly organized.
I'm getting back there again. Yes, it's really, I'm not yet. I have 5 kids. So, I mean, it's a work in progress. But I did just want to say that I totally get that it's not like, I know people are always like, embrace it. And I think there's a certain amount of embracing it and letting it sit inside of me and allowing it to be as big as it needs to be, but not acting on the impulse that has been really helpful for me is to sit within that storm of myself and not act.
Exactly.
And it's been a really tremendous experience this last few years in learning the grace of stillness in my life while simultaneously allowing this raging storm inside me to wail and rage and whatever it needs to do.
Let the little people in there talk to each other, you know, let it rage and then have that calm voice saying, I see you, I hear you, I honor you, but now let's get to where we can deal with this.
Oh man, I was going to share a different tool for a takeaway, but I think you just reminded me of another one is that just a few years ago, I started to learn to separate my trauma aspects out from myself. So now like with Eric, my partner, I will, if we've come to a place where I can acknowledge and I can be like, hey, so I'm really triggered right now. And my trauma is telling me that this isn't safe for blah, blah, blah reasons. I know right here that that's not true, but I need you to understand that in this moment, there is like a war being raged inside of me. And I'm going to tell you that my emotions are winning over logic.
Like, and starting to acknowledge my trauma and saying it as a third person, like my trauma is telling me this is happening, versus what I know is happening because I can see it with my own two eyes out here, and really being able to separate it out as a separate from me experience that doesn't necessarily define who I am. So that's been really powerful.
Yeah, not letting it own you.
Yeah. And a really quick other tool that I really feel I'm being guided to share, I hope it's okay, is coming to a moment in your life where you declare, no matter what has come before this day, no matter what was done to me, what's happened, what I've chosen, from this moment forward, I choose to take responsibility for me and my actions and my behavior, and I will no longer scapegoat my past as a reason for my misbehavior. And that moment can change life. Like I'm getting goosebumps. Like that's
I was thinking the same thing.
This is me. I own this, and nothing else is going to be in charge of me. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get through this so I can really own this, and nothing is continuing to affect me inadvertently or subconsciously from my past that I'm not dealing with. You know, because there's some patterns that we're going to have to deal with for a while. It's not just going to go away because we recognize they exist. There's many of them that we're going to have to practice, and we're going to have to, you know, like Audra said, like we're going to have to mirror out in our relationships to actually work through it, because it's one thing to be single and to work through it all on your own, but a lot of that doesn't actually become healed until we have been triggered in relationship with another human and been able to bring those lessons forward with us to really acknowledge the lesson and to prove to ourselves and the universe that we have thoroughly learned and are living that truth. And that is it's a very powerful moment in all of our lives. Like, and I hope that so many people got to come to that moment, especially through the sharing of these experiences in spaces like this.
That's very cool. And I hadn't put it in those words, but yeah, you're right. It's saying you no longer get to own me. This happened to me, but it doesn't define me, and it's not going to dictate how I choose to move forward.
Yes, and the bad people aren't going to make me bad because then they won.
Exactly. Siara, we all believe in energy and stuff of this nature, and I think we all know that the right side of your body is like your male energy part, and your left side is your female energy part. And I've always been a very strong, opinionated, outspoken, you know, almost combative, almost male-like in things. So for my first tattoo that I ever got in my life when I was 55, I chose a female symbol, the dragon, and I put it on a full half sleeve on my right side of my body to remind me that I need to be it's a reminder, and there are times when I will, you know, by such a things I'm sick. They have a sort of texture to them, and there are times when I'll be very angry, and I'll be in the headspace, and I don't know what will make me do it, but I'll reach up and I'll brush my arm, and I can feel, and I'll remember, Michele, remember, back down, you know, and that's a headspace that I think men are asked to be in all the time. I just can't imagine being in that, you know, not being given the room to have this. So yeah, there are many things that I've done, you know, to get where I am. Very definitely. And
healing is not a one size fits all. And I think it's really important for people to know that, because I think that sometimes we think we're supposed to be doing what other people are doing, and maybe, but also maybe not. So I think, you know, honor what's
I'm gonna jump off a cliff. I'm gonna be
I mean, I think it's good to look and see what other people are doing, because it might give you ideas on, hey, like I never thought of that. That might be something good. But honor what feels right to you. what feels right in your heart. Honor yourself and know that you don't have to be doing what everybody else is doing. And it's not a one size fits all. And I really appreciate both of you coming on and talking about your stories and sharing with everyone and sharing just everything. I'm so grateful for you both. And I'm grateful for you too, Roman.
Thanks.
You're a way shower for men.
Yeah. Roman, I would like to, I've already spoken with my husband about it, so he is aware. I would like you to reach out to him perhaps and speak with him, because men have abuse and trauma that many times they don't even, like we've talked about, they didn't even know it's there because they haven't been allowed to put it into perspective. They're not allowed to even talk about it, things of that nature. And I do agree, until we help the male, we can't help the female.
I appreciate you guys, and I feel like we have to look also into the gay community and the people who have different relationships, that they have feminine and masculine aspects, and they struggling with their masculinity and their femininity, and many of them have been abused, not only the way they're being treated, but also emotionally abused for their environment, being shamed. All these factors come in. We cannot look away from them, and we cannot point the fingers on them, because they are part of what we are. If we're not all together on this little tiny blue planet, we recognize that we're all here doing the same shit, in one way or the other. And if we're not becoming aware that as a partner, the reason why we're teaming up into that 3D relationship is that our partner has part of our trauma in reflection, or part of our trauma that we need to work on, it gets us not off the hook. And the reason why we choose to incarnate in that particular area, and that's my personal opinion, you don't need to adopt that. I feel the reason why we go into these agreements, okay, is that we want to work on that. We need to work on that, and we agree upon to come here, and everybody has a specific role to trigger us to heal. So I feel there is a primary person who works on things, and the secondary person who is here to support, or vice versa. And we don't know who that is until on the final day says, you know what? I was there first. I help you now back, because I can hold space for you. It's not a competition. It's a state of mind that we get that says, you know what? I feel good to hold space for you. Now you can get angry, and I still hold space for you because I love you for who you are, and I don't need to feel guilty for you being in that state, because what we usually do as men, and I'm the first one who studies it, is if my wife is going through a process that I feel offended, that I'm failing, not recognizing that my trigger is actually her trigger, for her to heal, what I have to shut up at that point and just hold space for it until that comes together.
What a fucking epiphany. Thank you, Roman. Explain some things.
I'd like to point out that it's not just men that have a hard time acknowledging trauma. To bring it back to kind of an economic situation, the poorer you are, the less likely you are to acknowledge trauma, because everybody's traumatized in your lives.
Right.
You tend to live within communities of trauma. And to be perfectly honest, there's no pride like that in the poor. You don't. I was raised in a very prideful family. We didn't call it trauma. It was just something that happened, and you just move on. It's not to be talked about anymore.
It doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, right?
Yeah, and so especially for men that grew up in those very depressed areas and in poverty, it's even more compounded and more difficult to bring forward, because there's no healthy examples around for anybody, the men or the women, to come forward and to acknowledge this really deep-seated trauma. And you're surrounded, you're immersed in people with trauma all the time. And so
I have a question for you guys. I feel like you're founders of that open conversation group that we put together, or kind of started here. And I of course, I so appreciate everyone for being here today and sharing your stuff, especially Audra and Michele and Siara and myself, for actually making time for myself to put that, because I basically blocked up my morning, which I, work, how do you feel, guys, if we would create it kind of like a group / container where people can share their information, like kind of a group where we can store our videos? And it's not a healing group. I don't. It doesn't have a medical background. It doesn't have a psychological background that says, "Oh, come in that group and we're gonna heal you." It's kind of like, you know what? A sticky note. You take a sticky note, write your problem. Like, I got it out.
Yeah.
And I think that group container for people to kind of express themselves the first time, I'm gonna share it.
Yeah, from the comments, it looks like there would be a number of people that would be more than happy to participate.
Yeah. And I'm asking with all the respect that you guys says, no, I don't want to. It's just my idea. And we're a group, and we share our story, and our story will be the first one to be up there. And I was like, I don't want that. I'm totally okay with it. So my question is, should we do it or should we not?
I vote yes. I understand completely if somebody doesn't want to, but I think the dynamics here are goosebumpy, good. And I always pay attention to my goosebumps, good or bad. And so, yeah, no, I think that would be a great idea. I really do. And I don't know if you guys can tell from my demeanor at all, my shoulders, everything. I am in a much better space now than when we started.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Nothing to do really with y'all. It just had to do with, really taking it out there and presenting it. But yeah, I like I said, I can feel it physically in myself.
Well, shame needs two things to be able to propagate it, and that's secrecy and silence.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Like I said, to come to the table and explain that I felt embarrassed, ashamed, and like I was a bad person and that I was at fault for being molested as a child. I mean, seriously, logically, I can understand the stupidity of that statement, but the subconscious part of things is still struggles with that. I still do, and I just think like, what's the difference?
Well, often our abusers make it out to be our fault. Like, it's because of you I'm doing this. It's because you're beautiful, I can't control myself. It's because you triggered me, I had to beat you today. It's all your fault. And so we learn to internalize that in really inappropriate ways. And yeah.
So, Siara, are you saying that part of the group part of what the group should be is secrecy and what was the other word you used?
It's perpetuated.
Yeah, shame needs two things to stay active in your life, and that's secrecy and silence.
Okay. All right. So that's not about the group.
No.
Okay.
Open up your mouth. Don't let it be a secret. Speak about this. The only way things are perpetuated, the reason why we don't take a step back and pay attention to things is because no one opens up and speaks about it. So it remains in silence and secrecy. And that's how abusers are allowed to perpetuate their patterns.
Yeah.
Why it never stops.
With that, regarding the group, not everybody is in a place where they can do what we're doing right now.
Correct.
And I think that sometimes people feel like, well, I can't do what you guys are doing, so I'm just not going to say anything at all. But I want you to know that this isn't what we're doing right now is not everybody's cup of tea. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that you are any less courageous or brave. You can you can tell your story by writing, journaling it. Like, you don't have to do this. This
Right.
doesn't have to be what you're doing. You're to share your story in any way, shape, or form. If you're journaling it, or you're telling your best friend, or you're telling your partner, that is so courageous. Just to let it outside of your body is so courageous. It does not need to look like this.
Share. You can journal it and you can write it down, but if you never share that with somebody, that's just still remaining right there within you. It's not given any validation. No one, you can't really process. You're just busy going, and a lot of people will go back and reread it, and stuff like that. I think the key word that you really said, share. Let your voice be heard. Let people love you.
I feel
It doesn't need to look like this, though.
no. I feel when we disassociate with our trauma, and we see other people sharing that, and that triggers us to say, wow, this person has been through a lot. That right there is empathy that comes from an experience. I cannot have empathy how that glass feels like, because I never was one, but I felt one on my head. Now I know the empathy of somebody else feeling that glass on his head. Speaking of, I got this a couple of pans on my head once upon a time. But that empathy should be already a trigger to say, oh, wait a minute. What does it trigger to me? And I want to write it down on that paper, how it feels and what comes up into my mind, feeling it. And that you can write it down so you can read what you wrote from a distant perspective, and then start merging that and make that yours because you disconnected it. And I think once you start there, then you can read through those things, feeling triggered, what we share, for example, and get triggered and said, what did it trigger me? I write it down. I can post it. I can be quiet about it yet, because at some point I just want to get a better picture of what's really going on here. And so I create this mosaic of myself that are disconnected and I don't see it anymore. I remember not looking at me in my mirror. No, I would not look in my ass. I'm like, yeah, my beard. Try to not look in my eyes, But then we start owning it. And once we own it, then it starts boiling. And once it's boiling, that there is pressure. And once there is pressure, it has to get out. And all of a sudden, we're becoming a steam machine. And that engine has to be lubricated. And then we need trucks, and we need kind of a direction. And all these things come together. Like, damn it, I just keep myself moving.
Yep.
And so, again, I so appreciate you guys for sharing that. We killed it today with 2 hours. So what? We do what we want.
Wow.
And we had all these people here. I think we're constantly at least 12 people. And I know many people put time aside and put pain aside and read and responded. And I so appreciate you guys for being here. Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks,
I
ladies.
love you guys.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you, Audra. Thank you, Siara. Just yeah. I mean, you got it, girl. It's really heartfelt. Thanks.
One love.
You don't want me to sing.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Come have a coffee with survivors. Audra and Roman inviting guests and holding space to discuss the healing journey to reunite with our true selves.
We see you. We hear you. Welcome to Coffee with Survivors, our safe place. Today with special guest Siara, mother, healer, and survivor.